Hello everyone, and welcome to another devlog for my 2D action-adventure game about tackling your problems with a giant drill. This month I've worked on some new content for Bottled Sky, but I've also been working on plenty of things that exist outside of the game that are necessary steps towards preparing for a release. A release is definitely still several months away, but I decided it was about time to create some social media accounts. After showcasing the game at a couple of public events, we've realized that we don't have many places to direct new potential followers. Whenever someone saw or playtested our game and wanted to know where to follow for updates, I only had a few options. Firstly was this YouTube channel, which is better than nothing, but it doesn't have any way for new followers to filter out all the extra information if all they want to know is when the game will release. Secondly was my developer Discord server. I've been posting updates there about Bottled Sky ever since the start of this series in early 2022, but the server existed long before that and was initially used as a place to funnel my Twitch livestream viewers towards. I would say that there is likely a lot of overlap between my Twitch livestream viewers and those who want to follow Bottled Sky updates, because I pretty much only ever livestreamed development of Bottled Sky. But this still isn't my ideal solution for where to funnel potential followers of Bottled Sky. The ideal solution would be to set up a Steam page, because gathering wish lists provides a way for all followers to know when the game is released and helps us gauge how interested everyone is in the game. I was initially under the impression that having a trailer was necessary or at least highly recommended before going public with a Steam page, so I was putting off this step for a while, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Our publisher has got us started by setting up a private Steam page, and that now gives me a specific checklist of stuff that needs to be done before we can really start gathering wish lists. There's quite a lot of stuff to do, so it might take a while, but I'll be sure to let everyone know when the page is ready for wish lists. In the meantime, and back to my original point, I've set up various social media accounts. You can now follow Bottled Sky on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I've even set up a new Discord server dedicated for the Bottled Sky community. Check the video description for links to follow those accounts. I chose to separate my developer server from my Bottled Sky audience server because my developer server will include content about all of the games I make in future, which will likely not be in the same genre as Bottled Sky. All of my past videos in this series have had links in the description to my developer social media accounts, but from now on I'll be using Bottled Sky social media links instead for the rest of this series. The next thing I want to talk about is a small update to the art style. Much of our initial art was built on this mock-up, which showed a potential background, the shuttle, asteroids, and a couple of enemy designs. Note the rough and sketchy outlines, which we liked as potentially being part of the art style. However, when we eventually built the background, we think that the style looked better as a still image than in motion, and over the course of a couple of days of tweaking, we shifted away from the more gritty setting of the original mock-up to a more bright and colourful style that we have now. The artist decided that with the new background, all of our sprites would look better if they were updated to have a much thicker outline, so they've been spending much of this month going back over old art. There has been some new art made this month, including some new visual variations on the single asteroid sprite that we've been relying on, but none of it has been added to the game yet. There's also some new enemy designs in the works, as you can see here. For some of the long-term followers of Bottled Sky, you might recognize these two white robot designs on the bottom left. The one on the right was actually the real first enemy in Bottled Sky, before I restarted development and started this devlog series. What I'd like to focus on for the next topic of this video is this enemy design right here. I discussed in my last video about the newest enemy called the Chomper, but I also talked about an AI system that I could reuse to build new enemies much faster. I decided to make another AI to test out how much faster I could build a new AI. To follow after the melee-based Chomper enemy, I decided to make a ranged-based enemy. Just for comparison, the hamster enemy took about 1 month, which includes the art, sound effects, and a lot of back and forth discussion about how it should be designed. The Chomper enemy, overall, took about a week or two. This new enemy, specifically the AI, took a grand total of 1 day. For some context, this doesn't include making the art or sound effects, only the programming. But it does include functions to play animations and sound effects, so the artist and sound designer only needs to replace the temporary placeholder animations and sound effects I used while building the AI. I suspect the art and sound effects will still take 1 or 2 weeks, but that just frees up my time to work on other things the game needs. If you want to know more about how the AI system works, I go more in detail in my previous devlog in the series. To To sum up why this enemy AI only took one day to make, I would say this new ranged enemy, which I've dubbed as the Bottery, actually shares a lot of behaviors with the Chomper enemy. There is one main difference though. In between attacks, the Chomper uses this encircle prey behavior, which chooses to either move clockwise or anti-clockwise around its target and calculates its next position based on its current direction from its target. This allows the Chomper to always be nearby and ready to do another melee attack when it has finished encircling its prey, and be more dynamic in its positioning rather than just waiting patiently for an arbitrary cooldown timer to finish. Since the Bottery has a ranged attack, I wanted it to keep its distance. I could have just reused the encircle prey behavior and set it to encircle at a larger distance, but having a larger arc to travel around means a lot more distance to cover. I also wanted to give the Bottery a quirk where it can move quickly in one direction, but be slow at turning, so moving in an arc wouldn't be ideal. Instead, I created a new behavior that has this enemy choose a position nearby its target to move to between each attack. The chosen position isn't completely random, but I'll spare you the details. You would think that the attack is the main difference, but since the AI system is intended to be solely about controlling movement, it makes sense that spawning a projectile has nothing to do with it. I already had a projectile system when I created the hamster enemy, so there wasn't much extra work to do there. In fact, even the melee enemy's dash attack appears in the ranged enemy's AI. I simply changed the numbers to make the dash move backwards, so that it looks like recoil. You might have noticed in these clips that this enemy often attacks asteroids, while if you saw my previous video, the Chomper only attacks the shuttle. I wanted there to be a common theme amongst these robotic enemies, that they don't distinguish between living and non-living targets, and will attack just about anything. It was a simple matter of including asteroids as potential prey targets. They will appear to the player as being hyper-aggressive and can attack you without warning, but they're also quite random about what they choose to attack. You should still be able to keep some distance and observe without being targeted though, because it does have a limited range of awareness. That pretty much covers the new enemy. The next thing I'd like to briefly mention is something that is more project management related rather than about game design. I wanted to reduce the impact of a team member, myself included, having to learn or relearn a system or content creation process by encouraging the creation of documentation. While developing games, we develop so many different systems and use so many different processes to create content that it becomes difficult to keep track of them. It's much easier if we don't have to remember everything for the whole duration of a project, which is where documentation comes in. For example, if I need to stop programming for a few months to work on something else like the game's soundtrack or story, I will likely forget the systems and processes I use to create new enemies for the game, as there are a lot of steps involved. Another example is the artist going through a particular process to create the background planets. If we decide later that we need more of these planets, then they've written documentation for themselves so they can quickly remember how they did it and what tools they used the first time. It's not just for personal use though. This information can be shared with other team members to teach them how to use systems if necessary, which can be good for onboarding new team members or giving new tools to others. For example, I documented the system I created that spawns those planets in the background. This isn't so that I can remember how to use the system, this is so that the artist can use this system and see their art go directly into the game, which allows them to iterate instantly without my input. The documentation process itself does take some time, so there is a cost, but hopefully the return is worthwhile. There are plenty of other things I worked on this month. I've refactored some old code, fixed various bugs, and added minor features that are a bit difficult to show off, but I think I'll close off the video there. Again, if you're interested in following Bottled Sky on social media, then check the links in the description. I probably won't post frequently just yet, but as we get closer to release, you'll see me put more time and effort into marketing. If you enjoyed the video, then consider leaving a like and subscribe to get notified about future videos. I always read and usually respond to comments either on these videos or in the Discord server, so if you want to discuss your ideas, then I'm always around to do so. Thanks for watching, that's all for now, and I'll see you later.